everyone. We're here at the Calabasas Library for Authors Night. I'm Karyn Foley, and I'd like to introduce our guest, Susan Pascal, who wrote the book on Agoura Hills. Now, I have seen this book around town, and I'm thrilled to have you today and disappointed that we can't say to you, and we have a book on Calabasas also. I think the closest thing we do have was when James Bozajian wrote his guide to Calabasas.
Right.
And for people who want to learn more about Calabasas, we don't have one book, but we do have a collection from the Calabasas Historical Society within here our own library, but that's by appointment only. But to have one book is perfect. And to have you write it and be here today is a pleasure and an honor. How did you come about to write this book? What led you to it? How did you get the job? Please tell us about it.
Well, I used to be a journalist covering the Agoura Hills community, doing hyper-local news, covering everything from schools to government to what's happening at the local markets. And I was doing that for about a year, and I actually went to cover a talk by an author at the local Agoura Hills Library talking about a couple of the books that he had written. And he happened to make an announcement at the beginning of this lecture. Oh, by the way, the publisher is looking for somebody to write about Agoura Hills. Well, being an author is on my bucket list, so I thought, oh, you know, I just can't pass that up. That sounds like a great idea. And this friend, Harry Medved, who also wrote the book about Oak Park, and he also wrote a book about filming locations in Los Angeles, hooked me up with Arcadia, and I did a proposal. And it's really wonderful how the Agoura Hills community, government, everyone was very supportive in helping me with the book, in doing the research. The librarian, Nina Hull, opened up the drawers and said, go to it. And we put out an all-call in the local media asking people if you've got any great old images or old stories, please send them my way. And
so they sent you things to be included in the book?
Yes, yes. Most of the pictures in the book are from the city. But we did have a few images, and I hate to say it, to this day I'm still getting calls from people, I've got a great picture for you, and unfortunately it's, unless we do part two, it's a bit late. But so many people really came through, and I had somebody, really was my right hand, Kim Castellon, who is now the city historian, and I think this helped inspire her. She and I worked, you know, crazy hours, nights, weekends, much to the chagrin of my kids, my husband. But it was really, I did it out of love for the city and this area. I mean, even though it's about Agoura, there's a lot of information that does pertain to Calabasas, the schools, the school district. Our first schools in Las Virgenes were here in Calabasas. And obviously the mountains, and so there's a lot that, you know, I learned and a lot I enjoyed while doing this.
Well, we were supposed to be one city. Supposed to be called the City of Las Virgenes.
Right.
But that never was allowed to happen. So Agoura went before us and incorporated.
That's right. That's right, 1982.
So how long did it take you to gather all this information?
Well, the publishers, in one respect, they make it easy. The Arcadia books, if you go through them, they're published all over the country, and but there's a template, and they say this is basically how many photographs we want, and this is how we want it laid out. So you kind of know in advance going in exactly what you're looking for.
So you were starting to compile all this information.
How long did it take me? Yeah.
In your home? Did you have a room at the library?
I did.
I know it can be spread out over everything.
I did. The publisher had given us a deadline saying this is when we would like the book to be done. So it was about 6 months, really.
That's all?
That's all. So I was very, very lucky to have...
That's a short period of time to gather information, compile it, select it, and then put it all together.
Well, yeah. And I was told by, that sometimes people do go over, but in order to get a release date on the book, you had to come in at a certain time. And I really worked hard to make that deadline. I think we might have been over maybe a week or two. But working with Kim and the library in the city, the library gave us a room to work in, and we were able to copy pictures. And I mean, it was just, they made it so much easier, really, to do something like this. And the thing is that there were so many wonderful images that you'll see in the book that were just sitting in old photo albums. Some of them were labeled, some of them had captions, which were great. Some of them were loose, and we would pull them out, and it would be like, treasure hunting, like, oh my God. I mean, I was shocked to find that, although it's been cold enough lately, but it snowed in Agoura Hills several times. And just some of the information we found out was just fascinating.
Well, it's a historical novel. It really is.
In a way.
You start off with just a big expanse of land and a few buildings, coffin corners. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
that was a stop along the wagon train. The gold rush brought people out this way, and there was one place to stop and water your horses, and then one family, the Lewis family, which we devote a little bit of time in the first 2 chapters. They settled in, and they moved into the area, and when they were building the 101 freeway, the contractors and the workers stayed there, and there's pictures of them eating lunch and relaxing, and and that's our freeway. I like to say, even though the book is about Agoura, it's really about the Old West.
That it is.
Yeah. I mean, everybody from, any state in the country could relate to, the Western and what happened.
Well, we're known as, Calabasas is known as the
Yeah.
last of the Old West. What did you learn from the book that you hadn't known before?
Well, the snow was, I'm from New York originally, and I grew up with snow and snow days. And I just assumed it just never snowed in Los Angeles, and I was wrong. It did snow a few times. We had one image in the book that has the Lewis Ranch covered in snow. I didn't get a date on it, and I looked back in the records, but I don't believe they had recorded snowfall that early on. It was probably around the turn of the 20th century. And then 1949, one of the original inhabitants of the Reyes Adobe, George Valdez, had told us, and we have a photograph that he went to school one day in shorts, and as they were coming out, it started snowing. And he said, we weren't prepared for for this cold white stuff coming down. So that was very interesting. One of the most fun I had, and the chapters that I enjoyed doing the most, was about the Chumash, which inhabited this whole region. And right around, there's an area off of Thousand Oaks and Cannon, of the Vaughn's shopping area. There's that whole village area. When in the late 60s, they were excavating that area. And as they were digging, they came across bones. And immediately they stopped, and archaeologists were brought in. And it turns out that that whole area by Medea Creek was an ancient burial ground for the Chumash. And so for about 6 months, all work was stopped and excavations, and there's a whole chapter about how large the area was, what was found. And but you kind of, now when you go into that market in that area, you think, oh my gosh. Somebody had even said, and I can't prove it, that the film Poltergeist was based on that story.
Amazing.
Yeah, and in fact, it's funny that some of Poltergeist was filmed in Agoura Hills, so who knows?
I love Old Agoura with Wizen's Market,
Yeah.
and all the antique stores.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's those areas, well, now it's been renovated, but that goes way back to when this area was being established, and it went through many incarnations, a restaurant, and different types of businesses, and now I know that they're really trying to build that area up. But it's a great destination for people who want to go antiquing, and a lot of new restaurants are opening up there, so it's great.
We're going to take a quick break, and next let's go into some of the personalities that helped develop Agoura. You've got some wonderful people there, and in the book, and they should be recognized on TV as well. So stay with us with Susan Pascal and the book on Agoura Hills and Author's Night.
Keep your family safe. Improve your gas mileage. Extend the life of your tires. How do you do it? It's easy. Just check it. Your tire pressure, that is. Keeping your tires properly inflated protects the environment, gives you peace of mind, and saves you money for more important things. So just check it once a month. A message from Cal Recycle.
We're back to Author's Night, and our guest today, Susan Pascal, who did a book on Agoura Hills. We were going to talk about personalities, and one name that always comes to mind, the Cannon sisters. Though we call it Canaan Road, they're Cannon sisters.
Yes, that family had owned quite a bit of land in this area, and yes, when the street was named Cannon and people referred to it as Canaan, they didn't like it. They always corrected you. They created a couple of business areas in the Agoura area, and in fact, after the street was called Cannon Road, people pronounce it, and to this day they pronounce it Canaan, and they would jump on you and say, no, it's pronounced Cannon. So whenever you see K-A-N-N Road, you'll know that originally it really was supposed to be Cannon. But the sisters opened up a restaurant in Agoura Hills called the Honey Bunny, and one of the meals on their menu was roasted rabbit, and hence the name. So yeah, I don't think that lasted too long, but they were pretty ruthless business women and big.
Now, what was the big hassle with the family? They were getting into arguments, they were fighting with each other, and then tragedy happened to Judy Cannon.
Yeah, from what I understand, the family was a bit notorious and was into some criminal dealings. And yes, Judy Cannon was murdered out when she went to feed her horses in Woodland Hills.
How did that happen? Where was that?
That was in Woodland Hills. And for a while they didn't know who could have done that. I mean, I would think at the time there were a lot of suspects, but it was eventually, and if this isn't in the book, we later got some information that although we did mention that it was the nephew that did it, that he just hated her. And apparently the police tracked the nephew to his home, and at that point, when they got there, he committed suicide. So, yeah, that was one of our interesting, the Agoura's not known for any type of crime, but that was an interesting part of our history.
Like you say, it was the Old West in those days.
It was, absolutely.
And being out here in those days, not very many people lived out here, so they kind of had their own run of the land, did what they wanted to do, and handled it the old-fashioned cowboy way.
That's right. That's right.
But does the family still exist in Agoura Hills?
I don't think they are in Agoura anymore. I believe there is one member of the family that lives in the Woodland Hills area, but they're not in Agoura anymore. The name is, and the fame remains, but no.
Does the Wizen family still live in Agoura Hills?
They live in the valley.
Okay.
But no, I don't think they live in that area either.
Now, you mentioned another name of a terrible reputation, and a scary one, actually, that was associated with Agoura Hills, and that was?
Charles Manson. Yeah.
What was his doings out in this way? I thought it was mainly to the north.
In Chatsworth, yeah. Yeah, this was something that, one of the things when you'd asked earlier about what new things did you learn, we all assumed that he didn't come out this way, the family. But back in the 60s, I believe, Peter Strauss Ranch, which is actually in the Cornell area of Agoura. Used to be Lake Enchanto. And at one point, after Lake Enchanto was a beautiful, resort area, and people would come to enjoy the summers and the weather, but it fell into bad times. And from what we've been told, Charles Manson and his family came out there, that he let the owner at the time let the Manson family work on the land. And we've since heard a few confirmations from different people who said, oh yes, I remember that. So yeah, that was part of our notorious past as well.
Well, those were scary days.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you mentioned the school district started during the formation, before cityhood, long before cityhood. When was the first?
The 1800s.
1800s.
The Calabasas School was here. This is where they was started at a granary. A Judge Isom, I hope I pronounced it correctly, wanted to start a little schoolroom for his kids and for some of the kids in the Calabasas area. And so he created this little room, and from there it grew. It grew, but really Calabasas was the start of the Las Virgenes School District. And then other schools popped up. It grew, and A.E. Wright became involved, and we get more involved, we get more detailed about how that took place in the book. But yeah, and it's one of the reasons we moved out here was for this great school district.
I didn't know what I was getting into until we moved here, and then I said, what a lucky break. As soon as we moved, this school system just took off.
Yep, absolutely. We knew when my son was getting ready to go to kindergarten, we're going to Las Virgenes. That's it.
But I loved reading it. It was going back in time. People I've heard about, never met, and those that I did meet, and to see the significant contributions they made in the creation of the city.
Absolutely.
It's an amazing book to read. And some of the things I'd like to discuss are the things that go on that we in Calabasas may not be as aware of, such as Reyes Adobe Days. What exactly does that celebrate?
It celebrates Reyes Adobe, which we do. One of our larger chapters, in fact, is the history of the Reyes Adobe and one of the first homesteads in that area. And Reyes Adobe Days started after the final renovation and the final opening of this beautiful adobe. And what it is just, it's really, actually, I guess now it's 4 days. It used to be 3 days, a night and 2 days. There's a great parade at the actual park grounds at Reyes Adobe. For children, they actually set up little stands and little areas where kids can learn about the crafts or the things that they did in those days, washing clothes, soap making. There's no, I'm just going to say it's not traditional food, but there's everything is opened up. Local artisans come out. And there's music, and it's just a wonderful, it's kind of a real down home, when you think of a hometown parade, community activity, that's what that is. There's a grand marshal, all of the council people come out, and
it lasts several days, doesn't it?
It does. There's a night at the Adobe, which is a very elegant party, and there's a dinner and wine tasting, and a lot of just mingling with the community. And the art gallery is open. And in fact, the scarf that I'm wearing was created by one of our local artists who creates these beautiful silk scarves. So you see things that are put out by the local people and their talents. And it's interesting to read about the history of Reyes Adobe. And again, we've learned about everything from we talked about the weather and how they lived and what the different people that changed hands and the different periods of renovation. So it has quite an interesting history.
You've got some beautiful estates in Agoura, and then you've got from the gated communities, the elegant communities. Then you go into a more rural feel right next door with the horses and old Agoura. You get a flavor of the way life is today and was yesterday.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's why people like it. I think they don't want too many people to know about, outsiders to know about it. You know, let's keep it hush-hush so we can keep it on the quiet side, you know. It's a little bit of an escape.
The Shoemash Museum, is that part of Agoura Hills as well?
It's not. It's not. Although...
but you have a lot of history with the Shoemash.
We do, and I did go to the Chumash Museum just to do a little bit of research, but when we completed that first chapter about the Chumash, we took that chapter and gave it to the director and the people that run the museum and said, we want your approval on this. We want to make sure this is accurate. You know, there's a lot of stories and legends and hearsay, but you don't want to offend anybody. You want to make sure this is accurate. And they said, absolutely, this is the way it happened. And I mean, if, you know, I'd have a dream at some point to maybe expand on some of that Chumash history. I found it fascinating.
I'd like to take a quick break, after which we, if you do not mind, discuss some of the personalities of a more lighthearted vein than we discussed before, some of the movie people. The Paramount Ranch, some of the movies that took place through Agoura, and some of the celebrities that had a place in history of Agoura Hills. Okay. So if you don't mind, let's take another quick break and come back to Author's Night with Susan Pascal.
Global warming is a problem.
Sound the alarm!
We think it's an important thing to save energy, to protect the environment, to protect the future.
Every who in Whoville makes a difference.
We need everyone!
Together, we can all make a difference.
Save energy with Energy Star, and then you can be
Part of the solution.
Go to EnergyStar.gov/kids to see what else you can do.
It's Karyn Foley with Susan Pascal and our book, Agoura Hills. We're going to go more into personalities now, because not only are the pictures beautiful, but some of the people in the book are quite interesting as well.
And beautiful.
And it has a history of movie stars, Paramount Ranch, and some of the films that were written, directed, and filmed on location there in Agoura Hills. Tell us some about that.
Paramount had purchased some land in that vicinity. In fact, at one point, Agoura was known as Picture City because of the filming that went on. So a lot of mostly Westerns, but there are other films that were made out there. A film called Wells Fargo. Gary Cooper was often seen in Agoura. He filmed a few movies in that area. And interestingly enough, one of the other sparked moments as we were researching was Clark Gable had a little walk-on part in one of the Westerns, and we have a picture of him.
Yes.
In there. So it's really the starting point for, you know, some really famous people, some famous films. And we show some of the sets. Paramount changed. The sets that you see now when you walk through the park are not what was there then. In fact, I think that was more for the Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, who was really the last TV show that was filmed with Jane Seymour in Paramount Ranch. But there were some phenomenal sets that were built for some of the Westerns and some of the period pieces that were done. And in addition, Paramount Ranch was also known for the Renaissance Festival that went on for many, many years. And so people from all over, I would say all over the country, would come out and live the Elizabethan era, you know, and talk, and speak, and dress, and eat the way they did in another time. But that was all in our own backyard, which was nice. And there was also a raceway that did not last very long, but there was a racetrack that you could still see little bits and pieces of it at the ranch. If you ask one of the park rangers to point it out, they will. Unfortunately, there were a couple of deaths, so it was not a safe racetrack, and it closed. But there was a lot that went on out there.
Now, how do these press kits fit in with the history of Agoura Hills and the movie industry?
Well, they don't.
Or you?
With me, okay. They don't have anything to do, but I have a love of movies.
Okay.
Prior to being a journalist, I was a unit publicist in the film industry for about 10 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And what I did was go out on location with the crew while they were filming, and kind of acted like the set reporter, really. You took on, you wrote about it, you observed what was going on, you handled the media requests that came in for the actors and the filmmakers. And then when the film was done, you wrote something called a press kit, which it talks about the story, it talks about what went into the making of the film. There are biographies in there, and if it's a special effects film, it'll talk about what went into the effects or makeup. For example, Ed Wood had a lot of makeup effects, so we talk a little bit about, what went on in that film. So yeah, that was part of my past.
But you also had a talk show or did interviews? What was that?
Gosh, yes. Now we're going way back. When I was a teenager in high school, I co-hosted a teen talk show called For Teens Only. And we did it at the local cable station. It actually did get picked up, so it went across Long Island. I'm from New York originally. And we interviewed local celebrities, but we tried to keep it oriented to teens. And we actually were fortunate. We interviewed Brooke Shields, was filming a movie called Endless Love at the time. James Spader was in that. Franco Zeffirelli was the director. And she was a teenager, so we thought, perfect, and the unit publicist of that film led us on the set, and we interviewed her. We interviewed the original Beatlemania. So it was a wonderful entree getting into college, because we had that on our experience, to move ahead. And I ended up going to New York University, and I have to thank some of that as the experience.
What a varied background, and all of that led to, I think, one venue where the people say, gee, why does Susan Pascal's name sound so familiar? Is you were editor of the online newspaper, The Patch. Mm-hmm. That's where I first saw your name. Mm-hmm. How does an online paper work? How do you do things as an editor? Do you go out and send people to do interviews? Do you pick them up from other sources? How does an online paper work? I always was puzzled by it.
Well, one of the great things about, primarily I started with the Agoura Hills Patch, and ultimately I did move on to do Calabasas as well, but when I was living in Agoura, you become ingrained in the community, and you're aware of what's going on around you. So you get out there, you go to the city council meetings, you go to the school board meetings, you go online and see what's happening at the various schools, what events might be taking place, you contact people. I did have some freelancers for a while, but towards the end it was just me. So
for the whole patch?
For the whole thing, yeah. So at times it was a 7-day-a-week, 24/7 job.
We are so multifaceted with this background that we've talked about. What are you going to do now? I mean, you no longer with the patch, you've done this, you've written the book. What is next for you, Susan?
Well, ongoing is being mom to my 2 kids. And
you live in Agoura Hills.
I live in Agoura Hills. And I don't know, I'd love to write another book at some point. I'm even thinking about some of these, you're talking about it's a story, there's possibly, movie book story ideas coming out of just some of the interesting people, but I don't know yet, still thinking about it.
Well, there's a new year coming, new opportunities, and
make
new
a resolution. Exactly.
Well, I thank you so much for joining us today, and I want to assure our audience that your book in Agoura Hills is here at our Calabasas Library. Mm-hmm. And with thank you to everybody involved, the Media Operations Department, the City of Calabasas, and our guest today, Susan Pascal, and of course our TV audience. And now I will leave you with these words that You are today the same person you'll be in 5 years from today, with 2 exceptions: the people you meet and the books that you read. Thank you for joining us.